Go.
We're ready to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar, where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do. It contains important information about our process. First off is informational items. Are there informational items from staff tonight?
Oh, the only one thing that I did want to bring up is that if you aren't aware yet, Layla Amon, who is the Community Development Director for the city, is actually leaving the city, which we're all very sad about. She's been a great member of our team. She actually has taken a job as the city manager for the city of Manzanita, which is really great for her. She had been wanting to move that direction for a while, and she had actually just recently bought a house out that way. So she's kind of heading off to the beach. So we will miss her greatly. But I will keep you informed and let you know when we start to look for someone new and let you know who we find. So just thought I would share that information with you all.
That is sad news. Thank you for the update. When is her last day? Do you know that?
It's May 7th. So next Friday.
Okay. That's quick. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, now we'll move on to audience participation. This is the opportunity to comment on items not on our agenda tonight. Does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on the agenda? Do we all know if we have any attendees?
We do have one attendee, and I don't see her hand up, so I don't think she has any comments for this portion.
Okay, if no hand is raised, attendee, if you would like to talk, please do raise your hand. Couple brief moments, pause, pause, pause. No hand raised, Vera?
Nope.
We're gonna move on. Work session. All right, next on the agenda is an update on the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Project. It will be presented by our very own Vera.
Good evening, Chair Lisbelt and commissioners. Thanks very much. This is here for my regular update. It's a project update, but I'm also, as you saw in the staff report packet, and it was lengthy, so hope you had a chance to peruse the items. But I do have a couple of kind of key questions or key issues to review with the commission. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback on a couple of those issues. So if I may, I'm going to share my screen. Of course, we have PowerPoint presentation. And please feel free to, this is a work session. It's intended to be a discussion, a working presentation. So please feel free to interrupt me. I may not be able to see if you have your hand raised, so just go ahead and interrupt me at that point. Okay. So I just wanted to start off again with our project schedule. So we're moving up the calendar into April, May. So we're starting to talk about refined code concepts, some draft code recommendations, some mapping. So we're sort of progressing forward into a hopefully sometime summer adoption of the code amendments. We would expect to be in public hearings, more work sessions, and then public hearings with the commission and with city council pretty much all summer is sort of what we've got planned, I think. All right. Again, just sort of a reminder, a refresh on the policy mandates for this implementation. Phase 1 implementation of the comprehensive plan is to increase the supply of middle housing and to provide housing choice throughout the city, to increase tree canopy and preserve existing trees, and to manage parking to enable middle housing and to protect trees. So it's a tall order to get all of this stuff done and to be able to figure out how to make it all work throughout the city. Some of our key ideas, or a key idea for this process is, again, a livability code, an intentionally designed code to provide more housing choice, not sort of by accident. Again, maximizing trees, trying to minimize on-site pavement to the extent that we can, and focusing the code on the form, not the zone. So really thinking about the form that the structures might take on a property. Much of our existing code has a lot of form-based ideas or pieces to it. Those are the kinds of things where you think about side yard height plane and setbacks and maximum lot coverage and building height. So all the things that kind of figure out where the structure of the box, would go or would fit on the property. Some of the types of the code amendments that we're thinking about are simplifying the number of zones, adopting a form-based approach, or really making that clear within the code, amending our on-site parking requirements, or another way of calling it off-street parking requirements, establishing a pattern guide or a menu for the different standards that would apply to middle housing, and to adopt a tree code for residential properties. And again, that tree code is intended to be applicable for development projects as well as non-development projects for residential properties. So just kind of a little summary and a refresh of what we're doing with this implementation project. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the open house and the survey that closed on April 15th. So these numbers are a little different than what was in your staff report, because that was written and submitted a little bit after or before everything closed and we had final numbers. So what you see on the screen is that we had 121 completed surveys for this second round, or this second open house. 68 people participated in the comments section on the open house in the various stations. That was something that we improved upon, certainly from our first open house. We didn't have the comments section activated in the first one. So I don't know if folks had had a chance, as you were in the open house, to look at all of the different comments. It was a really pretty terrific dialogue and discussion that was happening throughout within the open house stations that folks had amongst each other, or they asked questions and staff, was able to put in some answers. It was really pretty terrific to read where people were, on all of these different topics related to housing and trees and parking. It was great. We had 147 people either submitting comments or completing the survey. We had 70 total comments, and part of the comments section was also you could vote on the comments, sort of a thumbs up or thumbs down, and we had 283 of those. So we had a really pretty robust sort of discussion happening in that comment section. These are high level results, these couple of slides. We have our consultant combing through all of the data sets for that. So we'll have a much better and much more substantial analysis of the survey results and the participation coming up in the next couple of weeks. I did want to share some of the demographic data from the folks that took the survey. So the percentages that you see on the left-hand side of that vertical black line is the percentage as far as the demographics go that is part of the survey. The numbers that you see on the right side of that black vertical line are the percentages for these demographics citywide. So we wanted to kind of get a sense of where we were in comparison to the city as a whole for the demographics of the survey participants. So as you can see, we certainly did better this go around than we did in the first round for the open house and the survey from a demographic standpoint, and trying to make sure that we reached a much more diverse population, and that we had a group of folks participating in the survey that better mirrored the city of Milwaukie. We did have folks that chose not to include their race or ethnicity, so we're not sure obviously about those folks, but I think we have a better representation of the city as part of the survey participants here. So we're happy that we were able to work harder to get more of the word out and to really encourage folks to participate. So we still have work to do, of course, but we continue to try to improve our process and try to improve how we reach out to folks to participate in the survey and in the open house.
I'm sorry, Vera, may I interrupt real quick?
Please, sure.
There's been talk of the 2020 census coming out. Do we have the data for Milwaukie? And does this align with the current 2020 census data, or have you guys done that analysis yet?
To my knowledge, we haven't received any of the 2020 census data yet. So we don't have those numbers yet. I kind of can't wait to get them, but no, we haven't received those yet. So good question. Yeah, I just heard that on NPR that they were getting ready to release that, but to my knowledge, we don't have it yet. No.
Hey, Vera, this is encouraging. I mean, do you have any thoughts about why we had a much better turnout on the survey?
Well, we tried really hard to do even more outreach and more email blasts and using the pilot and really encouraging folks to get the word out. We use social media even more. We set up, we went to each of the NDAs and did presentations to each NDA in advance of the survey and the open house. We did a round table or a small group meeting with representatives from our BIPOC community. We did a small group meeting. We did one full one and then one sort of half one that was specifically all in Spanish with a Spanish speaking group as well. So we tried really hard to kind of to be sort of out there even more than we were the first time. Again, we tried to learn, from the first one and to see what else could we do to improve on the numbers. So it's very encouraging. I agree. Like I said, we still have more to do and more to improve upon, but I was very happy to see that we did better this go around.
Looks like the effort was well worth the time.
So
It's good.
think so. Yeah, thank you. And was definitely worth it. For sure. And if I could, it was terrific to hear this project being talked about in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but it was really nice to be part of that group. We had 11 folks participate in that Spanish language meeting. And it was really terrific to just kind of to be able to participate in that and listen to people be able to speak about the project and about housing and what's important to them in their native language. It was really, really great. I was really glad that we did that. So I hope we'll continue to do that more and to, again, reach people where they are or make things easier for them to participate. I'm really glad that we did that. So hopefully that helped as well.
Putting on our soon-to-be community involvement advisory committee hats, it definitely sounds like some of that is, I'd say, best practice. So really just, want to applaud you all for kind of going the extra mile there.
We need to do more, but I'm glad it's working, what we're doing so far anyway, to some extent anyhow. Okay, so moving on from this part of the update, wanted to get to a couple of the key issues that we identified in the staff report. And the big one that we wanted to spend some time talking about are flag lots. The staff report has some details, but I'm going to sort of work through the slides. Again, please interrupt as needed. But what you see here on the slide, on the left is sort of a graphic image that is just describing what a flag lot is. So the white portion, lot number 2, you see at the top is the flag, and then you see the pole up the right-hand side. And in blue is lot 1. So this entire rectangle used to be one lot, and then it would have been divided with lot 1 being where the original home is, and lot 2, or the flag, is where the new house is. In the middle, you can see it's just a graphic example of a flag lot with the parent lot. You can see number 2824 is the original house, or we'll call that the parent lot, and then the flag lot is behind it, number 2844. And the way the flag lot is defined here is that it's shaped like a flag, so that you have the entire lot. The frontage is that little section kind of right up front there on the street. You have a narrow section, that's where the driveway is, and then it would lead to the house. City of Milwaukee standards for flag lots, to the extent that we absolutely possibly can, is that we want driveways to be shared. So we try as best we possibly can to reduce the number of curb cuts or access ways. So what we would, generally require or certainly want to see is that there's only one driveway curb cut. So both properties are accessed via one driveway, and then they kind of split off, and the flag lot driveway goes to the flag lot, and the parent lot stays. But that's sort of generally what we see. And then in the map that you see on the right, you can see some lots that are outlined or that are colored in purple, shaded in purple. Those are the lots. This is in the Ardenwald neighborhood that I went through, and this is by no means all inclusive or a perfect identification of all flag lot opportunities. But generally, these are the lots that we see as originally platted in the Ardenwald neighborhood that are fairly narrow and very deep. So these are the kinds of lots that planning, we are approached fairly regularly by folks that own these properties, trying to see how, can I divide my lot? It's really big. They tend to be somewhere in the 70 to 72 feet wide and 200 to 220 feet deep. And that's how they were originally platted that way. So they have really large backyards, I would call them. And so, we've had folks approach us wondering, can I split the lot and, build a house in the back. Occasionally it's, for someone's son or daughter, to be able to have their own house and have a lot in the back, that kind of thing. So what I wanted to do was kind of go through, a map and just sort of understand generally, where there are a lot of these collections of lots that have what I would call flag lot potential, we call it. And so this is kind of, you can see that there's a very large collection of these platted sort of flag lot potential lots there in the Ardenwald neighborhood. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, before you move off on the slide,
sure.
This is where this flag lot discussion gets really interesting, because you see on the Google Earth image from the left and to the right are the single family houses that don't have a lot on the back. And you see that tree coverage that is back there. Yeah. And a lot of that is fairly typical of these flag lots. Now, I live on a flag lot, but I'm surrounded by these 100 by 200 foot deep. Mm-hmm. We have two that are mowed down fields. One, of course, right to the west of me, where the east wind blows all of the fir needles and branches on top of my roof. But, they have the typical, trees. So this is where this flag lot and the trees and can get complicated. I just wanted to show that so that everybody kind of realized that, hey, you kind of got a dual picture here.
No, thank you for that. And one of the things that has happened, I think, let me just go to the next slide here. It's going to let me. There we go. So the code history for flag lots is, we've been sort of talking about flag lots for a while. The first flag lot standards came in around 1979. And then in 1994, some code amendments reduced the width of the pole. So our code regulates a couple of things as it relates to flag lots, specifically the width of that pole portion. And it went from 20 feet wide to 15 feet in 1994. And at the time, the idea was wanting to promote infill development. And then in 1998, the 20-foot requirement was restored. And then there were some additional code amendments, one of which was to exclude the pole area from the minimum lot size. And I have there in a little sub bullet, in response to growing neighborhood dissatisfaction with the number of flag lots that have been created. What I also found in some staff reports at this time during these code amendments was that there were quite a number of variances that were approved for various things. So if you kind of look at a map, you can't really tell when you walk along the street on any of these neighborhoods, but there are several streets that have multiple flag lots kind of in a row. We've even seen some examples of triple flag lots too, which you can't do now. But the pole width, we have some that are as narrow as 10 feet, 12, 15. So there's a variety of widths, and many of those were approved via variances. So the 1998 code amendments and then into 2002 there were quite a number of code amendments that were intended to limit the ability to develop flag lots. In a 2002 code amendment, the access requirement is now 25 feet wide for that pole width. So it went from 20 to 25. Variances are prohibited, and this is the code that we have now. So since 2002, this is the code that we have for flag lots. Variances are prohibited as it relates to the flag lot. So you cannot seek a variance for the width of the pole, the area of the flag lot itself. So anything that has to do with the flag lot piece, no variances are permitted. The setbacks are increased for development on the flag lot. So the front and rear yard setbacks on a flag lot are 30 feet. They're 20 feet on a regular lot. And the side yard setbacks are 10 feet, whereas they can be as small as 5 feet or 5 and 7, depending on what zone you're in. So they're 10 feet no matter what zone you're in. You can't have more than 2 flag lots, and then there are some increased planting and screening requirements that are within the code. So when you develop a flag lot, fencing and screening and landscaping are all required as part of the development. You're also not permitted to have flag lots as part of a subdivision. So that's in our subdivision code. So there are a variety of things that happened at that point. The one sort of set of variances that you are permitted to seek on a flag lot are for the setbacks. So the development setbacks as part of the home on the flag lot, you can seek a variance to those. And we have on occasion approved as part of a partition, a type 2 variance so that you end up with front yard and rear yard setbacks of 22.5 feet. So some folks have sort of scooted that a little bit to give a little more building area on the flag lot, but otherwise anything about the flag lot itself, variances are prohibited. And so what we have found is sort of back to this map of the flag lot potential lots, because most of those lots are somewhere in that 70, 72 feet wide. But once you take that 25 feet off, you're left with a very narrow parent lot. And depending on where the house is, you know, those setbacks apply to the parent house now too, right? Because you're drawing new lot lines. And so those setbacks are all affected. So you end up with a suite of multiple variances, many of which would be a type 3 for the parent lot if you were trying to make the flag lot work, because you can't get any variances to that. So the result is, you know, we have these very large lots. They're very, you know, narrow, deep, and right now they're an ADU certainly is possible on those lots now, but land division is effectively impossible based on the flag lot standards. And so one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about with you is what do we think about flag lots? You know, we're opening up the code as we talk about residential development. You can see on the map there on the left-hand side outlined that we've got streets, you know, with multiple, you know, side-by-side kind of flag lots. So that's sort of what can happen, certainly, with multiple flag lots on a street. Is this something that we want to talk about? Should we think about encouraging infill development like this? And to do so, we need to think about our flag lot standards. Is this a desired outcome? Another way to think about flag lots is the street frontage, the pole portion. Several communities have code that does not require that. They call those rear lots. So flag lots actually have the flag pole, or you can look at rear lots. Now this image that you see on the right, those are rear lots in the new Cheragino Farms subdivision that's off Lake Road. That project was approved and permitted within the county, Clackamas County, and then the whole development was annexed into the city. So we're reviewing all the building permits, but they were all approved within the county. And so you see on those outlined lots, those are the rear lots. So they feel like a flag lot from the street, but they are accessed. You can kind of see in that image the pavement. So, so they're accessed via an access easement, a driveway on the front lot. So there are easements all over those front lots to allow for that access to the back. But what they don't have is actual property that goes out to the street. So they don't have that pole. So they have an easement, an access utility easement over the front lot.
Vera,
Vera, I have oops, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I before we get too far down, I was interested in this, history of the code revisions, and it seems like, there were some, some provisions put in, and there were some reactions that backtracked those revisions and everything like that. And I'm trying to understand that. And, if I'm oversimplifying this, please tell me. But is the rub here that we're kind of all used to having houses next to us, and whatever neighborhood we live in, but we prefer that our yards, in these cases, really big backyards, not have any houses next to them. Is that the rub?
From what I was reading in the minutes from some of these hearings, that was in fact the biggest issue was sort of that lack of privacy in backyards. So some of that had to do with, so the result was, the code that made it more difficult to create the lots, but then we also had the larger setbacks as well in an effort to try to kind of curb some of that development in backyards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sure.
And
Full
Vera,
disclosure, as someone who lives in this part of the city, I get tired of Greg looking over my back fence, and I'm joking. But I do kind of live in the area. And sorry for cutting you off, Lauren. Go ahead.
No, Vera, it's probably assumed, but I just want to know how can you just talk to how parking is different for these flag lots, or if it is at all, and then if service development fees are the same for these flag lots. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of infrastructure impacted?
Yeah. Off-street parking is the same for flag lots, so they still need to have their required one off-street parking space outside the front yard setback. Most of these homes have a garage, or something like that. So that's the same. Systems development charges, or SDCs, it's certainly for the most part, it's a single unit home. So they're assessed the same SDCs as a regular lot would. One thing that certainly can be more expensive on the development side is running the lines, that far back, right? So you're not close to the street, so you're running water and sewer lines, up that pole. So you're paying for that extra distance, of construction. But that's, that's on the developer, end of things from a construction cost standpoint. But from the city side, they're treated the same from that standpoint, from a fees and regulation standpoint in that regard. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other?
So,
yeah,
Vera, is there, can you speak to any of the advantages or disadvantages to allowing these rear lots that don't actually have any access to public right of way?
Sure. And we, in fact, we asked some communities, other communities, what do you do? And with flag lots and so on. And a couple of communities have both. They have both options. So they don't require one, or they allow either one. Certainly from to allow the rear lots as they do in the county, then you have an easement. So you have an access easement. Both properties need to work together for maintenance or whatever's happening with the driveway. Generally, the easement language talks about the, minimum width and, all of that stuff. That's kind of part of the requirements. But that's an agreement between two private parties. The city isn't a party to that easement. It's sort of, the city would require it to be in place. It would show that it's that width, but it requires two private property owners to cooperate, certainly, to be able to do that. One thing, so that can be a disadvantage in that there isn't a regulation piece of it. It's requiring two property owners to cooperate on that. One thing that it can do as an I'll call it an advantage from the development side, is that because you're not creating a new property line, you're allowing for the potential for more development opportunity because you're not creating a new property line that affects that original house, that front house, right? So with the pole, those setbacks get affected because you're creating a new property line. If that wasn't the case, the width is what it is, and now you just have an easement that's not affecting the property width itself. So sometimes what we have found is that I'll call it the inconvenient placement of the parent house makes it impossible to create the flagpole, right? Because it's right in the middle. It's not tucked to the side. It just makes it difficult. But if it were possible to have an easement, then we don't need to create a new property line, and it could just run up the side. So it's a trade-off either way, certainly. I think depending on what side of the fence you're on, the easement option can make things easier from a development side to create these rear lots. And that kind of, again, that's why we're having this conversation. Are flag lots something that we want to encourage the development of, as part of this overall housing discussion? And one of the questions that I want to ask is, or are there certain circumstances where we think that the flag lot standards could be eased as an incentive for middle housing? As an example, like, are there circumstances where we think that, because that's something that we can do that within the code. So that's kind of why we're having this open discussion, trying to understand. It's been since 2002 we've had this flag lot code, and we're curious, where do we all sit on that spectrum of wanting to either develop them or not, or what would we like to see?
If I may interject, one of the things that I think that we should look at is the requirement of the front door, which is actually, I know this sounds goofy, but you could, think about it, if you split off a lot and they're 100 by 200, that means that you have a lot of 100 by 100. If it's R5, you could divide that lot again, but you can't do it if your front door has to face the street. The two front doors have to face each other to be able to make those houses fit. So you could actually get in more housing if you didn't necessarily require the garage, I guess, to be facing the same as the front door, which I think that's how that kind of reads, right? Yeah. The garage has to face the same as the front door or something like that. Right. Because now you have to build your house wide instead of turning it the other way, which would actually, then you could double up, and you could add in more housing that way. And I want to tell you an interesting scenario. So I live in a hippie neighborhood. We have great neighbors, and the new neighbor that just moved in kind of to the side of us has that typical kind of 40 feet. What do you find in these flag lots? They got about 40 feet from the road. I don't know where the right of way actually falls, and then they build a house, right? And it's generally 2,000 square feet, single story, but it covers a bit of an area. And then they got this huge backyard. And so back there, the old owners had a shed where they parked their RVs and that kind of stuff, Well, so this person, they think, hey, you know what? We could probably do a tiny house nation back there. And they got plenty of room. I mean, they could stick 7 or 800 square foot or less houses back there, right? They got plenty of room, and it probably wouldn't be all that crowded for them. But of course, that would not be allowed in our current code because you can only have one ADU up to 800 square feet. But I think that these flag lots are really going to be your bonus developmental key. So there are two reasons for it. One is that you need to loosen up the front house and then the setbacks to the back because, like our house, we built our house in 2006, right before the market crashed. But they had to tear down the old house in front of us to be able to build the two houses. So we have a house in front of us and that. we have a shared driveway. We count our shared driveway as part of our square footage on our lot, I think. And of course, you know, the neighbor has access to us. But the neighbor who has, right, a concrete drive can't build a driveway to the street because they have to use our access point. That's another problem with these flag lots. We should allow the homeowner in front to be able to have at least pave access to the street without having to share the access. You could either call it off-street parking, right? Even if it's just blacktopped or something like that, because right now they don't really have any off-street parking or anything like that. You know, all they have is a small little driveway. So they, you know, when guests come, they lack any sort of off-street parking. The second thing is that we should look at where the front doors stick on these, and what kind of zoning do we want allowed back there, right? If we say, hey, if everybody can have an R1 or bigger, right, then we can have and we don't limit the amount of flag lots in the back, then we can have these things like tiny house nations or smaller houses, or, you know, 1,500 square foot houses or 1,000 square foot houses, which makes life more affordable. And it's really the only opportunity for development. I am all for it. I am totally all for it. What you are going to find, one, the resistance comes from the public. Just my wife is exactly the same way. She's like, well, I don't look at anybody's back, or all I do is look at people's backyards. I don't see anybody's house. I don't want a house back behind us. Well, you know what? It's not, you know, sorry if that is your luck, if our neighbors decide, you know, to flag off their lots. And I think that's fair for anybody. Two, it allows the property owner, at least in the front, to capture some wealth, right, for their retirement. Because, you know, that's going to be it could be a rental income for them. It could be a sell-off income. It certainly will reduce their taxes if they are trying to stay in place as well. And so there's a benefit to the owner in the front as well. And most of these people have been living in their houses for 30 or 40 years, or it's generational, or, you know, something like that, unless it's somebody, you know, comes along and buys it. Three, for the benefit of the area around it, it actually will raise property value, which actually will raise your property value of your house as well. Because now, if somebody comes, for example, this big, huge lot, which must be 200 by 200 square feet, you know, the one that just sold, only sold for $550,000. That barely even covers really actually the value of the land, right? If you could actually develop back there and get two houses in there, a developer would be willing to pay at least $200,000 for a lot that already has sewer to the street and doesn't have to do all this huge development. And look, getting pipe, if you got to dig up a driveway, sending in pipe is so minimal compared to, you know, having to do all the other things that you have to do. The screening, I don't mind. So we ended up putting in arborvitae, right, which everybody hates, but it's the cheapest screening that you can do, because I don't even think a fence actually, at least it didn't in 2007. I don't think it had to be like a green break. It couldn't just be a fence. It had to be some sort of planting or something, if I remember that right. And so you just get up with these arborvitae that everybody hates, and, you know, you have to trim and so on and so forth. And the other thing is what you don't understand, when you live in a flag lot, you are so far away, removed from the street, that you have no idea what goes on in the street, which has a tendency to isolate you. But the nice thing is because we can look into people's backyards, right? We feel that we have neighbors, right? And we have a shared common with the person in front of us, right? And they introduce us to other neighbors and so on and so forth. So I think the more that you can have in the back, the better off for the health of the person that lives in that flag lot, because then they have a sense of a neighbor that they can go and visit. And so I see those things as, the 5 positive things of developing these flag lots. And in all reality, it is so much better for the health of the city. And that's where you're going to get your growth if that's what you're looking for. And the restriction will actually force it to build a smaller house, right? Which should be more affordable, right? Even if a developer, what they do is they maximize out the amount of square footage to sell it for the highest price. But if you only have a 5,000 square foot lot that can only fit in a certain amount of shape, you can get 1,000 square feet on the bottom. Well, sure, you maybe only get 2,000, but it's better than a 1,500 square foot house on top of each other that's $3,000. That's twice the amount of money. So I'm a huge advocate for letting these flag lots develop as high as they possibly can get. I think it's only the best thing for the city and for the residents and the current homeowners myself. So there's my pitch. I'll be quiet.
Does anybody else want to comment?
I just wanted to clarify too that it won't just be single family houses that we're talking about here, right? This would apply for duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, depending on the size of the lot. So just so that's clear, it's not just about single family homes, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So I grew up on a flag lot. I grew up resenting flag lots, but I've come around pretty slowly on this one to basically agree with Greg. I'm sorry, let's be formal, Commissioner Hema.
It's a work session.
So anyway.
Let's say what you want.
This is an opportunity to create more housing, and that is what we are trying to do. I have concerns about the curb cuts for driveways, and on the one side, I'm absolutely for trying to figure out how do we, enable more housing capacity on land where owners are willing to put that capacity. And so if we need to have situations where, a parent lot has its own curb cut and the flags, behind it, have their own curb cut, then, from a policy perspective, I don't want those to be 2 curb cuts, from the streetscape policy issue, but from the housing policy side, if we're trying to get more capacity, I think, we're trying to get more capacity and we need to figure out how to accommodate that. So, if there were standards around that somehow allowed that to work and not, just make the sidewalk go up and down because of all the curb cuts, then, that'd be, I would appreciate trying to figure that out. I'm really interested by this idea of rear lots and, with the easements and how that really creates opportunities for, again, adding housing capacity to the new rear lots that, don't create these variance necessities on, the parent lot because of, their proximity to the driveway or whatever, the new driveway of the flagpole. So, I kind of like where this is going, even though I started off on, the other side of the fence, really. And so, what my remaining concerns are around habitat connectivity, and the requirements to have fences and all of that. And so I just want, I know we're not dealing with that in this phase, and that's fine, but, we do need to kind of keep in mind that we have to solve for that at some point, that requiring fences creates barriers, that's what they are. They are barriers, and they are barriers to wildlife movement and habitat corridors. And so we just need to be aware of that impact, make sure that we revisit that very deliberately in phase 3 or whatever it is when we handle natural resources. I think that's all I have to say for now, I think.
Others?
Somebody who maybe on the other side of the fence. I'm not, I would say I'm not quite sure where I am on this. Again, I live down in the part of Ardenwald where your maps were kind of showing, and I do think it would be live on one of those large lots. I think it would be useful to kind of maybe develop a more robust inventory of what are the flag lot potential. I mean, there, I think you had kind of indicated, that was kind of a first pass and not comprehensive. Because I think there's a lot of questions that I have that come to mind. One is, here in Ardenwald specifically, like we're already extremely close to the 75 bus line, frequent transit. So as I'm thinking from a zoning perspective, I think that already allows like more density. And so just thinking about opening up flag lots, which I don't think I'm opposed to either. I think it's just a question of like, how do you get it right? I think right now, and I think if you look at the code, I think the code has essentially created barriers to flag lots. We couldn't do one on our property if we wanted to. I guess maybe I feel like a part of the conversation should be what are we trying to solve for? Like, are we trying to solve for more single family units? Well, and maybe it's not necessarily even more single family. I mean, Greg had kind of mentioned earlier about, ADUs and cottage clusters. And, as I'm literally looking out into some of these, 0.4 acre, deep lots, does something like a cottage cluster maybe make more sense than a flag lot with a triplex that's, 30, 45 feet tall? I think it would personally make more sense. And it would probably also, it probably fit the form better. So yeah, that's just kind of, I'd say some of my rambling thoughts. I do think as I did a quick, very unscientific poll of some of my neighbors who also had kind of varying thoughts on this. And I think you see that as you kind of discussed in the history of this topic. I would say from a neighborhood livability perspective, Greg sounds like lives back on a flag. I find it interesting that we know a lot of our neighbors right around us, but most of those neighbors back on those flags, we don't actually know them because we don't see them. And so, from a community and livability perspective, maybe some people want that, maybe other people don't, but I just think it's another thing to kind of keep in the mix. So I think it would be good to keep having conversations on it. I think it should be a broader community conversation as we're thinking about housing choice. I don't think this has been a part of the conversation, and would encourage us to make sure that it's something that's not just us on Planning Commission having this discussion, that it get elevated into a kind of a broader discussion. But I think there's a way to kind of get it right. And the easements, I think, is an interesting thing. My mother actually just recently moved into that subdivision. So I'm watching some of those houses go up, and I'll be curious to see how those easements kind of work out. I think that's it for me as well.
You're getting a lot of good feedback. Vera, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair Lusfeld. And I know that Commissioner Kozarbati has his hand up, but if I could just for 1 second, just based on what Commissioner Sherman mentioned, part of something just to think about, and Commissioner Sherman, when you mentioned something about a triplex 35 or 40 feet tall. That's not part of any of our conversations for middle housing. The box that we've been talking about as part of middle housing is the same box as it is currently for single unit homes. So 2.5 story, like we're not proposing for middle housing to necessarily be taller. There have been some conversations about, are people okay with a little extra height if it means saving a tree? But I just don't want folks to be watching this thinking that the middle housing is going to be automatically, taller than what is currently permitted for a single unit home. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I think, and just part of the flag lot discussion is really a land division discussion. Under the middle housing code, minimum lot size is what is sort of figuring out what kind of housing can be there. So if you have, for your property, Commissioner Sherman, that if you don't subdivide it, you could potentially put additional units behind you. We just have to figure out how they get there, but they're all going to be on the same lot. The idea of the flag lot is allowing for a land division to occur. So, it could still look the same. You could still potentially end up with, a couple, 3, 4 units, on one of these deep lots. It's just a matter of, or part of it is a matter of, can you divide the property? And so that's part of our question to the commission is, are there certain circumstances where we think that we want to encourage the flag lot because we think that the cottage cluster, for example, could happen on its own lot, separate from the parent lot or parent home. So those are some of the kind of ideas or things that we're hoping to suss out. Are there certain conditions under which, so there would be different flag lot standards for certain kinds of development. And if you were intending to develop a single unit home, well, then these are your flag lot standards, and maybe it's the ones that we currently have. So that's kind of part of what we're trying to just see. And we certainly don't need to reach consensus this evening. It's more about, is there a general direction that we can continue to explore, particularly as we, bring this discussion, to CPIC as well, to kind of, we're sort of trying to evolve all these different ideas. The code is complicated. There are a lot of things to think about, but flag lots has been something that we've been coming up with. And since I've been reviewing all the Cheragino permits and I see all of those, lots, it's like, oh, let's talk about the pole and if we need one or not, basically. So, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Khosrowshahi, I didn't need to jump in. I just kind of wanted to make sure that we were kind of focused there. Thank you.
No need for apology. Actually, I want to thank you for clarifying that, because I know that could make some people nervous. But I have to echo what Commissioner Hemer was saying earlier. I think we have a massive opportunity here. And I think for the goals that our city is trying to accomplish as it pertains to housing, I feel that the hidden density housing could be a huge part of the equation to solving that problem, as opposed to, the open lots that are available and building, massive units on them. That, obviously that's going to help as well, but that hidden density could be something that potentially changes the landscape of housing in our city. And as you said, if we do it right. So I just wanted to echo that. I think there's a really huge opportunity to tackle other aspects, maybe even affordable housing with the hidden density. So I am all for that discussion. I would love to get into that more.
Thank you, Commissioner Khosrowshahi. Commissioner Massey? I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance. Nothing to add. I think, Vera, you're getting some really great feedback here. Lots of really great comments. I would only add that I would support pretty much everything that Commissioner Hemer had said. I think the devil's going to be in the detail here, and certainly the access to the flag lot is one that I'm concerned about, and how we balance out borders and barriers between lots. I think that's another piece, and I'd be really interested to just study, and is there some kind of hybrid between the flag lot versus the what's the other?
The rear lot.
Rear lot. Yeah, thank you. If there's some kind of hybrid approach or something we could steal from that rear lot that could help influence the direction we take here. Is there anybody else who wanted to comment? And Commissioner Hemer, it sounded like you took yourself off mute for a moment.
I want to raise the point that opening up flag lots or loosening up flag lots will conflict with the tree canopy goals, because most of these lots are forested. And so that's where it gets, right, that's where it kind of gets really tricky. Mission Park development is a perfect example of that, where, there was a house there that had a large lot in the back that was fully treed and canopied. And right, what was the one thing that got everybody upset? Well, you're going to remove those trees. And so while we're looking at both, let's make sure that we balance this out so that we don't create conflict, so that neither one will comply with each other as well, if you understand what I mean by that.
Thanks, Greg, for that. And just quick closing comment, Chair Losfeld, is I think that's kind of maybe to some extent where I was kind of trying to go in terms of, allowing kind of through the land division process to develop new lots and put housing in from a flag lot perspective. You're probably going to see the market go for that first, because that's easy, that's known, over more creative options like cottage clusters or ADUs or things like that, where net you might end up with the same number of units, but there might be other trade-offs that happen along the way, like trees getting cut down because you got to punch a driveway back there, and the developer just wants to like build a 2,000 square foot or 2,500 square foot house as opposed to put a few, small cottages back there. So I think that is some of kind of what I'm kind of grappling with, because I think if you unlock the flag lot opportunity, that's what the market in many of these lots around me, that's what's going to happen, as opposed to perhaps some more creative solutions that might better fit the form and better fit kind of our larger goals. So I really appreciate your comment there and the conversation, because I think that's what I was trying to say earlier and just wasn't able to kind of fully articulate.
Commissioner Edge, did you have a comment?
I did. Yeah. And so I think that we should try to think creatively about, what are our policy goals and how are these new regulations or changes to the code going to support those policies or support a broader array of those policy goals. And so, housing is not the overarching single goal that is, the highest priority above all else. All of our land use planning goals, statewide land use planning goals, are important and have their own place, and they balance against each other. And the same thing is true for our comprehensive plan policies. There's no, single set of comp plan policies that we adopted that we said these are the ones that everything else will be secondary to. So we need to be looking at how the balance of our policy objectives are being addressed and make sure that what is being proposed and ultimately permitted and delivered to the market is meeting the broadest array of policy goals that we can get. And so if it's not exactly meeting a policy goal to allow a rear lot or a flag lot with a super big single unit dwelling that's going to be really expensive, so that solves one policy goal, which is we want more housing, but it also comes at the cost of those trees and affordability and equity and on and on and on. So how do you make it to where unlocking that regulation is done in a way that fulfills a broader array of those policy goals? And so that we get, maybe we get a triplex back there if we have to lose to the trees, or maybe we get a smaller single family dwelling that is, more affordable and we save some trees. How do you make the code work to where we can, achieve the broadest array of policy goals? I'm just going to keep saying it that way. Because there will be trade-offs, but we don't have to just, roll over and say, well, because they're satisfying one policy goal, then we can ignore all the rest. We should definitely try to make it work to the greatest good that's possible. And then the next thing I wanted to ask is, we're talking a lot about land divisions, and then we're also talking about, and in that DLCD discussion, that, for the LCDC that was included in the meeting packet, and we're talking about, these different ideas about how we ensure that certain percentages of our lots are eligible for these different housing types. And so, when you're looking at that and saying, okay, well, we're going to say that there's a minimum lot size to qualify for a triplex and a minimum lot size to qualify for a quadplex, then you have people dividing land to where it's smaller than that, and then it changes the ratios. And so I'm wondering, are we going to be able to address that context and make sure that we're not dividing our way out of being able to provide these choices, these housing choices on, these, large proportions of our available housing or, properties or land is, I guess, the best way to say that. so, if you, basically, if it's 7,000 square feet minimum to do a quadplex and you've got all these lots, that could be divided to 5,000 square feet. And then now we've changed the calculus. And there's, now a bunch of 5,000 square foot lots and fewer 7,000 plus, square foot lots that can accommodate that more intensive housing type. What does that do to the calculus, and how do we, mitigate against that?
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to be said, I think we'll leave those closing comments.
May I just make one more comment towards Joseph's comment? And I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I will say it one more time. To satisfy market demand and product availability, because Joseph is absolutely correct that builders are going to build what is going to be the most sellable in the market with the least amount of risk. Okay, and so if we don't restrict code, because we know restricting code has led us to this point right now. And every 3 or 4 years, we have this big old discussion about, what are we going to do with code? We make the code broad and we incentivize what we want. So for example, if we like cottage clusters in flag lots, then what we say is that, if you're going to build 3 or 4 smaller houses and call it a cottage cluster, we will only charge you an SDC fee of 1 building instead of 4. Those are the kind of incentives that encourage that market development of product that creates risk, because the costs are lower to the person that is taking that risk. And so I will leave it at that. If we leave our code broad and we incentivize, it is easier to change the incentive than it is easier to change the code.
Right. And I feel like this is the beginning of a very long conversation to be had with multiple groups, Vera, but I hopefully that gives you quite a bit of input to take on in the next step. Should we be moving on to the next agenda item, or Vera, did you want to add anything to close that one?
I did have a little bit extra just to talk about. It does go to what Commissioner Edge was talking about as far as the percentage of lots for the different middle housing types. So if you would just give me a few more minutes just to kind of close that. That came up as a question from one of the city councilors, and so I wanted to make sure that that the commission also heard that as well. But if I could then, so is it fair to say that the commission generally is interested in hearing about ways to think about our flag lot standards now, and maybe there is another approach that we could be taking? I don't know what that is yet, but there may be a way to use our flag lot standards as a way to encourage a different type of development, and that's kind of, is that a fair way?
I think that's a fair generalization. Yep. Okay.
And maybe this is a good time to share with you that now that I know that from the commission, the city council was similarly interested in that general direction as well. So we'll see kind of where all of this lands. It's always in the details, but I really appreciate this conversation. This has been terrific. Thank you so much. Let me just jump over, if I could, to the presentation just to kind of finish off where I was really quick. Okay. Let's see. Just advance for me. Let's see. There we go. So these were the key questions, but these are actually a couple of photographs from Cheragino Farm. So the sort of the 1-story or 1.5 story that you see sort of in the front, that's the front parent lot. And then the other 2 pictures to the back, the 2-story home, that's on the flag lot. So that's the house to the back. It's kind of hard to get a good picture because I was kind of right up when I was doing the inspection. But in the case of the county standards, they don't require they don't require the shared access. So we have multiple curb cuts here on that sidewalk. So the front parent lot has their garage and driveway to the left, and then the easement driveway goes kind of up the middle in between, but it's serving 2 homes in the back. But all of their flag lots, similarly to ours, front door faces the backyard of the front house. And so everybody's sort of facing the front of the street. But I just kind of wanted to just kind of close that out with some photos of what's happening down there via the county standards.
Vera, real quick, there's not like shared sewer lines down that.
No, it's just, but they're running, they're all in that easement, in that utility easement. Yeah. So in that lower picture where you see kind of the front of the 2-story house, to the right of that is another flag lot to the back. So their easements kind of T, and then to the rear lots share. But again, these are rear lots easement on these driveways. All right. The second key issue that I just wanted to go over, just to discuss this as an item, is within. So again, our implementation project, the foundation of this is our comprehensive plan, goals and policies related to housing and housing opportunity throughout the city. Secondarily are the requirements for House Bill 2001. And so that's basically a check for us to make sure that we're meeting the math requirements for House Bill 2001, but the comp plan is really what's driving our project. I just wanted to make that clear. I think we've, a couple folks have thought that, is this just a House Bill 2001 project? It's not. So there's certainly more to it than that. But within the House Bill, and what I might call Division 46, which are sort of the rules around the House Bill and kind of how we need to meet the House Bill requirements. There are 2 different ways that they talk about providing flexibility to a community in how we regulate middle housing within the city. And so there are 2 ways to do that. There's a location-based approach, and that's where the community designates where middle housing will be allowed. Sort of those areas, I'll call those areas. But there's a metric that you have to meet within the House Bill for the minimum percentage of lots for each housing type. And so they're fairly high as far as, 80% of lots need to allow a triplex and so on. The minimum lot size approach is the one that we've been working through and we've been recommending and has been our approach for this project, in that housing types, triplex, quadplex, cottage cluster, et cetera, they're permitted throughout the city. And it's based on the lot size that's associated with those types. As we discussed in our last work session, because the way the House Bill is written, the different housing types are permitted based on a lot size. So the zones start to not make much sense because lot size is what's governing what can be built. So the way that we've been approaching this process is allowing for the various housing types throughout the city. It distributes the opportunities throughout the city because it's based on a lot size, as opposed to specific areas or something like that. And what we believe is that this meets the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plan, because we are distributing the housing types throughout the city. We're not creating areas for them. And part of what and in the staff report and in the attachment, which was the DLCD memo to LCDC, there's not enough acronyms in this sentence, I don't think. See if I can find another one, is trying to address that through actual mathematical calculations for communities. Where would they be already, for the various, for this performance metric approach, as opposed to the minimum lot size approach. And what they found when they compared the percentage of lots based on lot size is that for Milwaukie, the performance metric for a triplex is 80%. And if we look at lots over 5,000 square feet, that's 94%. Like, we're meeting the performance metric by this minimum lot size approach. So, so it's sort of, I really appreciate TLCD staff doing the analysis. It was terrific because it was a great way to sort of double check and make sure that by doing the minimum lot size approach, we get various benefits by not sort of creating these areas for the various middle housing. And the way to, so this idea of, for example, Commissioner Sherman, you brought up the, the number 75 bus route, on 32nd Ave. And so in trying to think about, should we be, concentrating development or something like that around certain areas like that? These are really high numbers for percentages of lots that probably wouldn't get us there anyway. But this idea of, again, allowing for the various housing types to be sited throughout the city gets to that idea of, of equity in that we have a distribution of the middle housing opportunities everywhere in, in all of the different neighborhoods. And if you remember from, I think it was the last work session when we looked at the various zones and where a lot of our minimum lot sizes are, they're all over. I mean, even if you're in the R10 zone, for example, well, most of the R10 size lots are outside of that zone. So it's because our zoning changes so much, the lot sizes are all over the place in variety of in all of these zones. I mean, in Ardenwald, a lot of those flag lot opportunity lots, those are, 17, 18, 19,000 square feet. A lot of them are really very big, but they're in an R7 zone, which is a 7,000 square foot zone. So it's, I think what we've seen in the city is that, the lot sizes in many cases don't match the zone they're in anyway. So this way we're providing the opportunities throughout the city. So we just kind of wanted to cover this piece of the legislation. And I see Commissioner Massey, you've raised your hand.
Sure, Vera. I'm really glad the analysis numbers fell where they did. And I got to tell you, I think using this location-based formula was going to be hard to explain to the individual, property owner about, where their project fell into this aggregate, about whether it got approved or disapproved. And so I think it's much simpler that we go along with this minimum lot size because I think it's just they're going to be able to get their arms around that. And I think it was going to be more difficult to, put their project into this aggregated, requirements of the state law.
Actually, I hadn't thought of it that way either, that it was another benefit. It's just, it's simpler to explain as well. Thank you for that. Commissioner Edge, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so I'm still curious about the interplay between, the minimum lot size approach and the what zones we decide to keep for, medium to lower density residential. And then are we effectively creating exclusionary zoning, for quadplexes by allowing, by saying the minimum lot size in this area is 7,000, but over here it's 5,000, and people can divide it up into 5,000 that'll never be able to build a quadplex on it. I'd honestly like to be able to see quadplexes on the same lots that we see triplexes on. I think that minimum lot size should be the same, should be 5,000, or even lower. I don't think that we need to have a distinct minimum lot size for quadplexes that's different than triplexes. And maybe even the same thing for cottage clusters. Maybe it's not that important to say 7,000 square feet. Maybe the market will choose that on its own, but why would we, necessarily need to regulate that? What are we getting out of it by saying you need a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet versus 5,000 square feet to do a cottage cluster? I don't know why we would make that distinction anymore. And then I really want to understand what the minimum lot sizes will actually be in our different zoning districts. And what kinds of land division options, people will have, landowners will have once the new zones are applied. because, we're muddying the lines, we're muddying the distinctions between the zones, which is where that standard comes from. If you're doing a land division, your lot size is, the minimum lot size is dictated by the zoning district you're in, and we're just wiping that away. And so what is that now? And what standard are we applying to land divisions for regulating a minimum lot size? And again, how do we ensure that that doesn't become exclusionary by, dividing to less than the standard that would allow for missing middle housing?
If I could, great questions. The way the trajectory that we're moving along based on feedback that we've gotten from CPIC all along is to consolidate the zones. So at this point, and there will be more on this at our May meeting, both May CPIC meeting and then May meeting with you when we come back, is this idea of what are currently our high density zones. So R3 down to R1 would be one zone. And then the R5, R7, R10 zones would be another zone. So we would be with two zones in the city. And within those zones, basically, it's because our high density zones, quote unquote, are the ones that allow for the larger multifamily developments, the apartment complexes, right? So that's a very simplified difference between the two. But then the minimum lot size in the other zone, in sort of what is currently our lower density zones. I'm trying to be really careful how I talk about these. But in that new consolidated zone, minimum lot size is what will rule, right? So if you have 5,000 square feet, triplex, 7,000, as the way the House bill is written right now with its minimum lot sizes. So to your point, Commissioner Edgin, it's a good one. There are, a lot of lots that have been platted at 7,000 square feet, because that's what the zone, they're in the 7,000. So they can't be divided further from a triplex, quadplex standpoint. So, they sort of are there. But to your, what we need to remember as part of how land division works is that our current regulations do require, minimum frontage. So it's not, everything is sort of how do the new lots relate to the street? So can you divide your property and still maintain access to the street and that kind of thing? Or, reverse it, any one of these larger flag lot opportunity sites could do, a quad or a cottage cluster just on them like they are. They just need to create the access and meet whatever the, site design requirements are. So you're asking great questions. The land division piece is kind of where it gets really nerdy and fun, and trying to figure out how does that piece, it's easier to think about, it's 5,000 square feet, I can do this, but if it's larger and I can start to split things, how does that work? And so your question about, the land division potential is an interesting one, and trying to figure out how do we do a couple of sort of scenarios on some of these lots just to get a sense of kind of, what might work on some of these. So that's sort of in our next kind of round of thinking about the land division piece and trying to understand, what does that mean? But we need to, I think, just be sensitive or just remember that there are other standards that apply to, to land division. It is about, frontage or access to the street, aside from this flag lot business that we just talked about. But generally, we're creating lots that need to have frontage or access. So understanding what do those design standards mean for any of these larger lots that might have development potential. So yeah, they're great questions, and that's kind of the next evolution of what we're thinking about. But you're bringing up a good point about dividing ourselves out of cottage clusters and and quads, and sort of everything ends up being this 5,000 piece. And it's an interesting comment. Why do we have different lot sizes? That's an interesting key question that might come up again at another conversation. Should we be thinking about I'll make this up, 5,000 square feet just is the lot size for, kind of whatever. And we see, how does it lay out? You start applying off-street parking all the other things, and then that'll help you figure out what you can actually build. It's interesting. Thank you very much.
Vera, did we allow you to get through the rest of your presentation?
Yes, that's it. This was terrific. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the conversation. This is wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Well, I think the content that you brought to the discussion definitely provided, I think, as much feedback as you got. So thank you for diving in. Laura, if it makes sense, it seems as though the next agenda item would be an update to the Planning Commission on the Neighborhood District Association leadership. Presented by yourself.
Yes, presented by myself. So as you all know, there was this neighborhood meeting back in 2019 where with the neighborhood associations, and folks had wanted to have this ongoing commitment from the Planning Commission to have a joint meeting with the NDAs moving forward. And that was part of what we put into the bylaws that we've been working through. And so we wanted to be sure to get this meeting on the agenda. We missed it in 2020. That's unfortunate because 2020 was kind of just a tough year. And but now we are in 2021. And so I saw this as an opportunity to invite the neighborhood board members to come and just talk to the Planning Commission and bring up anything that they wanted to bring up. And I know that the last time that this happened, I included some questions that were sent out to those folks in the packet. And then I also included what was discussed. And so I just wanted to get some feedback from you all really as to what kind of topics you would want to bring up with the NDAs. I know last time it was pretty general. It was a very loose structure. So folks just came up, there were some questions that were sent out, and then folks came up and I believe just talked with the Planning Commission about some of the ideas and concerns. And so I guess my question to you all is, do we want to have a loose structure like it was last time, or do we want to have more structure? And what kind of questions could I be sending out to the NDAs to kind of spawn the conversation that we want to be having with them? So that's kind of my just overview of what I was thinking, because I really just wanted to hear from you all and see kind of what your ideas were for this meeting, since you all some of you were here for the last one and know more about how that went and how we can be more successful, or just get more information from the NDAs.
Who'd like to get started? Commissioner Massey?
Yeah, before we I understand the question. I think it's a good question, Laura. But I kind of want to go back to something we talked about, a couple of meetings back. And one of my concerns is to make sure that we have a fruitful meeting, is to have, people comfortable and open dialogue and that kind of thing. And so we had talked about, when would we have a hybrid meeting? When would we be able to meet in person? I guess my concern is that I want to make sure that we really hear from the NDA leaders and that kind of thing. And I think that if we were in a room, we might get a more forthright discussion. I'll just stop there because I don't know if anyone else has those same concerns that I do.
I personally, Commissioner Massey, don't have that concern, because I know that the NDAs have been operating during this past year and a half and over Zoom and have been successfully doing that. I'm curious what other people think.
I have no concerns about virtual meetings. I feel just as connected as I do when I meet everyone in person. So this is totally comfortable for me. And so I know other people don't feel this, don't necessarily feel the same way, but, I think we should certainly make this an option available to them, because, that might be the difference between some of them being able to participate and not, even if we were to do an in-person thing. But that's just my take on that. The virtual thing's been working out really well for me.
Yeah, and I understand exactly what Robert is talking about, because Zoom is clunky to have a conversation. Let's just be honest, it's clunky to have a conversation. So to be able to make this successful, I think what we should pre-ask the NDA leaders and the land use chairs is to allow themselves to give them, a short introduction of themselves and, what they've been working on maybe. And then let them give us a concern that has to deal with the communication of land use, right? Because that's what we're really talking about, is the communication of land use. And let them bring up issues that they have. And then that way we can circle back and maybe we can address them one by one once the leaders and the land use chairs get through. Because I'm sure that hopefully everyone here knows what NDA they belong to, or what community council they belong to. And so we should recognize the NDA leaders and the land use chairs ourselves. But I think it's important that we learn what their barriers are to be able to, for their group to be able to get to us in time to be able to give their recommendation to the Planning Commission of their land use issue. So a little bit more structure is going to be needed to make this successful. I would just give them each like 3 or 4 minutes to talk.
Can I ask for a quick show of hands? Who was at the last meeting? Okay, great. Go ahead, Commissioner Sherman.
Thank you, Chair Losfeld. I was just another idea to kind of throw in the hopper. I like a lot of what Commissioner Humer just said, but it might be valuable, or I'd welcome others' thoughts on kind of getting a little bit of the high level talk from Laura in terms of like what the kind of the schedule looks like in terms of the work and the comp plan, and this is what we're doing now, and this is what we're looking at next year, and this is beyond that. I don't know if others think that could be valuable, but I think it could help frame out, like, yes, you might say you want to work on TSP now, but that's going to be, 3 quarters from now. So, and that's, as I think, as much as some of us have said, let's take a comprehensive approach and try and do some of this all right now. We have limited capacity, and this is just kind of how we have things sequenced. And so I think it might be useful to kind of frame out some of that sequencing. I don't know what others think about that.
Yeah, certainly sharing some portion of our work plan that we just shared with City Council seems really reasonable. Commissioner Khosrow-Body, do you have any thoughts?
No, actually, at this point, no, I wasn't at the last meeting. It was before I joined Planning Commission, but I do like what Commissioner Sherman mentioned. I think that's a great idea. Give them something to take back to their NDA meeting, so they can report back to the neighborhood. I do also understand what Commissioner Massey was saying with meeting in person and having that connection and being able to do that. Zoom has been functional for me as well. But yeah, I totally understand that, because sometimes it can be hard to really get the gist if somebody's listening to you and really paying attention to you over Zoom as opposed to in person. But, considering the situation we're in now, that's still up in the air.
Agreed. And I'll just share, I shared some feedback or thoughts with Laura and Commissioner Edge this afternoon, but was thinking that similarly to what some others have said, that providing some structure to the conversation would be helpful. I think I agree, providing an overview of our work plan would be really great to start off with. And if we could, I thought it might be helpful, this group, to just brainstorm if there were topics that we might begin to encourage or lead with, so that it doesn't become so free-forming conversation and discussion that I just want to make sure that we're getting out of this meeting some outcomes or some takeaways. So ideas on what that might be. Go ahead, Commissioner Heemner. What's on your mind?
I think the first thing we should ask them is, what can we do to help you get your NDA members to take the surveys?
The
right?
surveys.
The surveys, because those have been a lot of that feedback loop. And if we saw a spike in survey usage by going out to the NDAs, maybe that's one approach. Maybe it's an easier link, or maybe it's making sure that Jason has it in his Friday update. What can we do to encourage more of your NDA email list or your NDA contact list to take more of the surveys? I think would be a number one priority of the city.
One of the thoughts I had running through my mind was we're starting to define this discussion of a scope around the CIAC, and not that we have any definition or anything real tangible to share with them about what it is, but I thought that there could be some topics there to just start to tease out some of that information on how they feel the CIAC could be more effective, particularly because it will be held within this commission, those responsibilities. And I just want to make sure we're engaging them as much as possible so that we can really expand on our own perspectives within the group. That was one thought.
I was also thinking, I know that the NDAs are, being notified about the comp plan, and the comp plan implementation process. So I know that's already occurring. They already should have, feel comfortable that they have a pipeline to providing feedback into that process. But I think particularly because of our relationship to the NDAs, us as a review authority, where we're really strictly looking at applying the code that is to these, land use applications. And, that's kind of our rigid, legal charge is to, apply the standards that are. What are, and then we talk to them and we say, okay, when you come and testify, only testify about the things that we can actually do something about. Well, here's the opportunity for them to give us some feedback about things that we can't do anything about. Things that aren't in the code right now. And so what are the challenges that they have with the development that's being approved and that's going in that they're not able to address with us, or we're not able to address with, with applicants because it's not in the code. And that's important because we then, would try to feed that into the pipeline of the code drafting occurring in the comp plan implementation process. So although I know they already have their own, capacity to go to the comp plan implementation committee and submit comments through that channel, I think that us trying to prompt them through some discussion, because we can have a discussion about that and how, we as commissioners, because this isn't a public hearing, we can talk about our own feelings as commissioners about how, what we're considering and how we're weighing the code and what, kind of what that dynamic is when we hear from them about things that we can't do anything about, and I think there's a whole discussion that could be had there, around some of that subject matter, and that this is a unique venue in which to do that, that doesn't really exist otherwise. And so, what are some challenges that they have with, development that's been approved and delivered, has gone in, that we just haven't really been able to do anything about it, because it's not in the code. And how do we get that into the code in a way that, fulfills the comp plan policies, broadly, as, we've discussed about other things. But how do we, because, again, we can't work with them on this stuff during the, application reviews. So this is kind of the opportunity to say, hey, I really wish you guys could do, whatever. And then we could actually take that and maybe send that over to the CPIC and say, hey, we heard from the NDAs that these are some of the challenges they're facing and that they have and some of what they want, to be able to do. And we can't help them with this, but we see a way that we could, or maybe we need to explore, what are ways that we could. But I really just think that this is a unique venue to have that discussion. I think it'd be a missed opportunity if we didn't try to, have that conversation with them.
So maybe what I'm hearing is that we could kind of start off, and I think this is a really good opportunity because we have some new commissioners. I'm new. I haven't met a lot of these folks. And it's kind of this opportunity to kind of get to meet each other again in this new space with new people. And so maybe it's the opportunity is I could say, let me show you a little bit about the work plan, what we've got coming. And then we could lead into Commissioner Hemer. What you were saying is like, introduce yourself, tell us what you've been working on over the last year, and then do you have any specific questions that you want to bring up with the commission? And then we would go into these other questions that were just developed here is what can we do to get the NDAs to take the surveys? What's the scope? Help us with the scope around the CIAC. And then are there specific things that you'd like to see talked about that are outside of projects that we need to be thinking about in our code? So would that be kind of a way to structure it?
I think so. And there might be a prioritization of that to where it's, I almost wonder if you open with Commissioner Edge's question. So it is kind of like a free, it is a conversation that is very open and very much just kind of a reflection. It's not nearly as pointed as, hey, how do we improve survey responses? Or, hey, what do you think about this particular charter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could totally do that.
Yeah.
Are you thinking that would also kind of be prompted kind of in advance so they have the ability to, okay.
Yeah, I think that then you mean as in informing them of an agenda item? Yes, yeah. That'll all be published ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe it's a little bit more in the weeds from what Commissioner Edge was saying, but I think it could also be useful if there was any specific examples from projects that could be, here was the project and here's what we were hoping to try and get out of it. And here's what we couldn't do, like in that really tangible sort of way. I think that would be really beneficial, especially as we're going through kind of a code development process. So maybe to encourage, I guess maybe what I'm saying is encourage them, like, if you had an issue with a specific set of applications and would like to come and talk about that, please do. I would imagine a number of the land use chairs probably have a short list of those items come to mind pretty quickly.
And then also, though, being careful that we don't want to go in and revisit all of the past cases. So it's like that line to walk of like, can we identify things that came to light during that process without kind of going back through all of the other cases, because that could take some time, I would imagine. But trying to be a little bit more broad, I think. And I can think of a way to phase it. I mean, I can think of a way to try to construct that phrasing.
Right. You do. Trust me, you don't want to listen to the Washington bike lane versus the Monroe Greenway argument for 20 minutes because, right, there's probably a neighborhood that's willing to discuss that for 20 minutes. And I do want everybody to recognize that there are 2 new chairs this year that haven't chaired before. So they're fairly new to the process as well. And we have chairs that have been, one's been involved for 25 years and another one I know that's been involved for at least 10. So we have some old school, new school, and they may not have met each other yet either. So it's a good opportunity for them. And this is for Joseph, and Joseph is the president of his community council, right? And so what I would like to ask you, Joseph, is what would you expect the county commissioners if they brought all of you community counselors, right, into a room, what would be the things that you would like to be asked, right? Because let's look at it from that reference point. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, and my answers would be different from everybody else that shows up because I'm really into the land use weeds and love this policy stuff, and and I'm looking for specific things. But ultimately, there's there would be a lot of questions about that don't have anything to do with land use, but then there would be, when you're talking about the land use applications, it's, what can we do to try to collaborate to save more trees? And I know the city's working on that specifically. How do we, it's really, it's the same kinds of things that I think that, we get in the city, that you would expect to hear. And there's a lot of symmetry there. With this community. But when you're talking about the county and it's so broad with, so many rural community planning organizations, then I think you'd get a wildly diverse set of topics, in the county, for that to be literal with, what your example was. But if you were to focus just on our urban CPO that's just south of Milwaukie, then we have a lot of the same types of things. We want to be able to engage on land use applications early and provide feedback to developers about what our hopes are for for properties in given areas, what types of uses we'd like to see, and ultimately try to make it more collaborative, and I think to the end that there's something that the code authority could do to adopt code that would make it create more opportunities for collaboration between, the NDAs and really the applicants, because, that's who is, coming in and trying to do stuff, and you need to be able to, kind of get some ideas in there and have some feedback before, things get so far along that, they're really just looking for permits to do what they already know they want to do. And that's the part that I think really drives people up the wall, is that there's no real opportunities before things are pretty firmly set in stone to have any kind of a discussion with, applicants about, what mutual goals might exist. So that's what I think that they would want to hear, my community would want to hear about is, how can we actually get involved and have some exchange of ideas, early enough in the process to make a difference.
And so I think that's a decent question to ask our group. Are we being collaborative enough, early enough in the process, at the local NDA level, that you feel that you can work with the developer or the builder to really affect change, is the ultimate goal, right? To affect change, to get your input in before the plans go in to get their stamp for the permit. Thank you.
Laura, that sounds like a pretty full agenda. By the way, how long is this in meeting intended?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that we actually have two hearings for two different things before. So hoping that we can get through those, or we can punt and we can find another time, if necessary, if that's the preference, to find just a completely wide open planning commission meeting. Remember, we have those little gaps in the meetings and I was trying to fill them, and then this got some hearings on it. So I guess the question is whether or not we want to just have one planning commission meeting dedicated to this, and then we would just wait for that opportunity to arrive.
I would say that I'm assuming that there is some kind of priority that is put on hearings that came to this, because that's unfortunate, because I hate to tell this group that we need to bump this meeting out and that might not happen for several months, and here we are, and then what's to say they don't get bumped again? I wish that didn't happen. That feels a little in some way disrespectful to the group. So
it's a challenge because of the way, when development applications come in, they have to get put on the agenda because we're working through a timeline. So those always take the precedent. So it's a little tough unless the Planning Commission wanted to have a different meeting.
Yeah.
A special meeting?
A special meeting. That's one.
Commissioner Massey's had his hand up for a while. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I don't think it's a good idea to jam this NDA meeting behind a couple of development hearings. I think that would not be very useful. And secondly, along the same lines, is that although I agree that we need some structure to this meeting so that it's not some free form session and everything like that, I would also urge us not to have it too structured. And, if it looks like the presentation from the staff and the discussion from the commissioners starts to reach the 25 or 1/3 level of the time, then we've spent too much time talking and not enough time listening. And so we never learn anything by speaking, we learn by listening. So I think that we need to take a patience and quiet pill so that we can hear from them appropriately.
Agreed. Oh, Commissioner Sherman, go ahead.
Chair Losfeld, I'd be willing to do an off-cycle meeting so we could focus kind of and have energy and attention for having a meeting with folks. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Because I agree, I don't think we want to log jam it after a few hearings. And, my hunch is like, we probably need at least 60 minutes, maybe even 90. I don't know. Just wanted to throw that out there for others for the discussion.
Same, in agreement. I think we need to have a offset meeting, offset of the agenda and to focus and give them that time.
So what I just wanted to say is I just wanted to make sure that we give them enough time to, really think over the questions that, we want them to come prepared to answer or to come prepared to ask or answer, depending on what, whether they have questions or we ask them questions to come talk to us. But I think getting that in front of them, giving them time to digest it, maybe even have a meeting where they can discuss it and then solicit feedback from their members and then bring those ideas to us. I think that that kind of a cycle would be really healthy to, give them that opportunity and then have them come to us prepared, kind of to talk about the stuff that we're thinking that, we want to hear about. And then whether that needs to happen in a special meeting, not on a Tuesday, or whether that needs to, or whether we, end up having an opportunity a month out or however far out it needs to go to give them that time. I think that we can look at how we schedule it then, but I would also be open to attending a special meeting to give them the opportunity to not feel rushed in having this discussion with us. But certainly I think punting just long enough to give them the opportunity to really think over, the prompting questions would be a good idea. Even though it is, I know, kicking the can down the road a little bit further, and we don't want to do that. I think it'd be a good idea in this case.
Commissioner Heemner, would you like to add anything to this?
No. So, Laura, I'm going to help you out here. Do not do it on the second Monday. Do not do it on the second Wednesday. Do not do it on the second Thursday. And don't do it, I think it's the fourth Monday and then the third Wednesday. Check Island Station is a little bit off. I think it's the third Wednesday. I know Ardenwald's the fourth Monday, but and so that restricts us to dates. And I'm not sure if we conflict with city council schedule for Zoom and TV purposes. So, we have that restriction as well. So it might have to be a Thursday or a standalone meeting if I don't know if we're allowed just to make a commitment to say, hey, July, I don't know what date it is, but July 10th, we're going to do this irregardless if we're going to have any hearings, and we put the hearings at the end, and we do the NDAs at the beginning of the meeting if we set a particular date for the Planning Commission.
Okay, Laura, so I'm sure you'll take on that piece of homework, but it sounds like the group is kind of saying that it needs to be off cycle in order to give it the full volume of the discussion.
Okay, so what I think I can do is I've already invited them, but that's okay. We could just say, hey, we talked to the Planning Commission, we talked through this, and we want to give you all some more time, and we feel like we have these hearings, and so we're looking for a better date certain when we know that we'll have enough time to walk through this, to talk with you all. So I guess my first question is, one, do you want me to come back to you all with an agenda to look at one more time, and so that we have an agenda that's set, so that when we do find the date that we're ready to go with that, and then I can send the agenda out to the NDAs and just say, here's what we're going to be asking, and we're looking for a date that will work.
I don't feel like I need to see an agenda personally.
Okay.
No, that's what I was going to say. I think that do you feel like you already have enough to, kind of take what we have and put it into an agenda and just get the ball rolling? Cool. Yeah. I'd be comfortable with that.
Chairman, I would like to make a suggestion that we'll leave it up to the chair and the vice chair to set the agenda, because maybe they might want to restrict what we all have talked about, or maybe have something to add. But I would be willing to have the chair and the vice chair set the agenda and leave the leave out the rest of the Planning Commission if the rest of the Planning Commission agrees to that.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, that works. So then I can get something drafted and share with you all, and then we can get feedback and then try to figure out when the best time to have the meeting would be. Sometime off cycle, but with giving the NDAs enough time. I think the idea, I thought that was great. Commissioner Hemer's or Commissioner Edge going and saying, sending the agenda out to the NDAs and then giving them the opportunity to have their monthly meeting, right? And then scheduling it, so making sure, so that'll take a couple of months probably, depending on where they are in their cycle, so they can have that conversation at their NDA meeting and then come fully prepared to have a full discussion with the Planning Commission after already talking with everybody in the group. So I will figure out that and find a date that can work for everyone.
Well, in a couple of months, we might be able to meet in person.
We might.
So Commissioner very well might. Massey may get his wish. Greg, you can stay on Zoom. Okay, so I think Laura.
I'm not worried. I just don't think the governor is going to allow it. That's
okay, Laura, is that, do we
I feel confident.
Complete that one for you?
Yes.
Or help you, I'd rather. So then we move on to the next section of the agenda, which would be other business.
And I don't have anything.
Does your staff have any updates?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Next item on the agenda here is just Planning Commission discussion items. Are there other items for discussion? Greg's eyebrows peaked.
Party on Friday nights in May, Porch Fest, right? If you got a band, get out there and go play. If you're bored sitting at home, go out there and go see the band. So enjoy it in May, right? Every Friday night. Go out there, go party, check out the museum schedule. I think we're going to have a couple bands down there too. If not, wander around your neighborhood, go over to Vera's house. She's going to be playing the tambourine in the front yard. So there you go.
My neighbor will be May 14th. Her band will be playing right next door.
Nice.
Okay.
I love that.
Send us the invite.
Forecast for future meetings.
Hold on. I got an announcement as well.
Apologize.
So May 8th and 9th, the Friends of the Letting Library will hold their 8th annual plant sale. And that will be May 8th, which is the Saturday before Mother's Day. And the 9th, which is Mother's Day. If you're really in a bind, You can come on over to the Milwaukie Floral and Garden facility on Lake Road. Again, that's 9 to 4, and because of the COVID restrictions, they're doing reservations. And so you need to go to the Letting Friends website and book your half-hour schedule. I know it's cumbersome, but it's worth it. There's some beautiful plants at great prices, and it benefits our wonderful library.
At least half of my plants are from the plant sale. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Very good.
And I like the idea that you could schedule your own time. That's fantastic.
Okay.
Okay. Other thoughts? No? Laura?
Nope.
Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, did you
I
all
move we adjourn.
Oh, Laura, you can't. You had your chance.
I know, but I didn't know if you wanted me to go over the forecast for future meetings. I was still on like discussion items.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
please.
that's right.
Sorry
I
about
kind of brought
that.
that up.
Motion
Yeah,
withdrawn.
sorry.
Sorry about that. It'll take 1 minute. Okay, May 11th, we've got the Milwaukie High School sign variance continued hearing, right? And then we also have the Providence Supportive Housing height variance, right? That's one of the applications in several applications that are coming before you. May 25th, Vera will be back to talk about comprehensive plan updates, amendments. And then on June 8th, there is an accessory structure variance, and then 2 of those actually on June 8th, and they're both coming at you from our esteemed colleague Vera, both of those. And that's it. I'm done now, really, for reals.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay, I will take that motion.
Oh, real quick, just because Commissioner Massey had mentioned the plant sale, I jumped on the website and it says you have to wait until the 1st of May to reserve your spot for the 30-minute spots. Not true. You can do it right now. So anybody out there in Radio Land, start booking your appointments now.
Awesome. Good sleuthing there, Commissioner Sherman. Commissioner Edge.
ain't trying.
Commissioner Edge, please. Go
I move
ahead.
we adjourn.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
All those opposed? All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.